This short story is called The Wedding Plus One, and it is perfect for you if you want to improve your English through story. The story will be on your screen so you can listen and read at the same time. And stay until the end because we're going to analyse the words and phrases from the story so you can learn more English. Let's get started. Sophie stared at her phone, chewing her lip. Do I really need to do this? Her cousin's wedding was in 3 days, and her ex, James, would be there. Worse, he'd be bringing his new girlfriend. Sophie could already imagine the awkward conversations, the pitying looks from relatives, and the fake smiles she'd have to give. She needed a date. Someone charming, confident, and, most importantly, not real. Her best friend Lucy has suggested an app that let people hire plus ones for events. It sounded ridiculous, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Sophie scrolled through the profiles until one caught her eye. Tom, 29, experienced +1, good at small talk, can dance. Perfect. She hesitated for a second, then tapped book now. Sophie adjusted her dress as she waited outside the hotel. The air smelled of fresh cut grass, and guests were already arriving, dressed in pastel colours. Then she saw him, Tom. He walked toward her with an easy confidence, wearing a suit that looked like it had been made for him. He had a relaxed smile and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Sophie? He asked, stopping in front of her. She nodded. That's me. He grinned. Nice to meet you. Don't worry, I've done this before. Just tell me what you need. Sophie exhaled, feeling her nerves settle. Just pretend we've been dating for a few months. Be charming, laugh at my uncle's bad jokes, and, she paused, make it look like I've moved on. Tom gave a small nod. Got it. Shall we? They walked inside together, and Sophie could already feel people staring. Dinner went smoothly. Tom was a natural. He charmed Sophie's aunt, complimented the bride, and even pretended to remember childhood stories from her cousins. Then came the moment Sophie had been dreading. James walked over. His new girlfriend, Chloe, clung to his arm like she was afraid to lose him. He had the same smug look he always had when he thought he was winning. Sophie? James said, smiling politely. It's good to see you. Sophie kept her face neutral. You too. Before James could say more, Tom leaned in, resting a casual hand on the back of a chair. So, this is the famous James, Tom said smoothly. I've heard so much about you. James blinked, clearly caught off guard. Oh, all good things, I hope. Tom grinned. Depends who you ask. Sophie pressed her lips together, trying not to laugh. Chloe gave her a once-over. So, how long have you two been together? Sophie hesitated. A few months. Tom nodded. Best few months of my life. James' smile tightened for a second, like he was trying to hide his irritation. Well, he said, adjusting his tie, it's great that you've moved on. Sophie tilted her head. Yeah, it is. James and Chloe excused themselves, and as soon as they walked away, Sophie let out a breath. That, she said, turning to Tom, was brilliant. Tom smirked. It's what you hired me for. After dinner, the music started and the guests moved to the dance floor. Tom held out his hand. One dance? He asked. Sophie hesitated. This was all fake, wasn't it? just a job for him. But something about the way he looked at her made her want to say yes. She took his hand. They moved easily to the music, and for the first time all night, Sophie stopped thinking about James. She wasn't pretending anymore. She was just enjoying the moment. "You know," Tom said, spinning her gently, "this is one of the better fake dates I've had." Sophie laughed. "You mean you've had worse?" "Oh, much worse," he grinned. "But I think this is my favourite." She looked up at him, her heart beating a little faster. Maybe this wasn't all fake after all. In the story, we use words and phrases you might not know. Go through these explanations and examples, understand their meanings and how to use them in everyday conversations, and then listen to the story again. Let's get started. Now, the first one is scroll through, and this means to look through a list or options on a screen. So a lot of people scroll through their phone and do those types of things these days. Now, in the story, it said Sophie scrolled through profiles on the app before choosing Tom. So she looked through the different profiles before finding her favourite, who we know is Tom. Another example is, I scrolled through my messages but couldn't find his number. And that is incredibly disappointing. The next one is walk toward. So on the video, you can see people walking toward their gate. This means to move in the direction of something. And you'll often hear walk towards, walk towards. So in the story, Tom walked toward her with confidence. He was very confident about being her wedding date. And another example is, she walked toward the exit without looking back. So this is an example from something else, but you can imagine somebody is mad and she just walks toward the exit without looking back. Next one is lean in. Lean in. And this means to move closer, often to speak quietly or act intimate. So in the story, Tom leaned in, resting a casual hand on the back of her chair. And another example is, and you can see this in the photo, she leaned in and whispered something funny. She leaned in and whispered something funny. The next one is move on. To move on. And this means to stop thinking about or being emotionally attached to something. So the woman in the video hasn't moved on, as we're about to learn. James assumed Sophie hadn't moved on from him. So he assumed that Sophie hadn't stopped thinking about him. And it took her a while to move on after the breakup. It took her a while to move on after the breakup. The next one is give a once over. Give a once over. Now this means to quickly look at someone or something, often to judge, but not always. Okay? So, for example, in the story, Chloe gave Sophie a once over to judge her, to see what she's like, to look at her and think, who are you? What are you about? And another example is, he gave the contract a once over before signing it. So this is where you quickly look at the contract before you sign it. The next one is hold out. To hold out. And in this case, it means to extend something to someone. Okay? So, Tom held out his hand for a dance. As you can see in the video, it's showing you someone holding out their hand. Tom held out his hand for a dance, which is like saying he is suggesting that Sophie dance with him. She held out the keys and smiled. She held out the keys and smiled. The next one is make it look like. Make it look like. This means to create an impression of something that isn't true. For example, in the story, just pretend we've been dating for a few months. Make it look like I've moved on. And another example is, we need to make it look like we're busy so they stop asking for help. So Sophie in the story, to go back to that, wants to make it look like that she has moved on. She wants to create that impression of something that isn't true. The next one is burst out laughing. To burst out laughing. And this means to suddenly start laughing. For example, Sophie pressed her lips together, trying not to burst out laughing. So she had to stop herself from bursting out laughing. And another example is she burst out laughing when he told her the story. So the story must have been funny, which is a past modal, must have been. The story must have been funny, so she burst out laughing when he told her the story. And this one is change the subject. To change the subject. It's very common. And this means to talk about something different to avoid a topic. Sophie changed the subject before James could say more. So she talked about a different topic because she didn't want to talk about what James wanted to talk about. And he quickly changed the subject when they asked about his ex. Think about the last time you changed the subject because you didn't want to talk about a topic. And this one is, it's what you hired me for. It's what you hired me for. This is a casual way to say, this is my job, or this is what I'm supposed to do. It's what you hired me for, Tom said with a smirk. So that was from the story, saying this is his job, to do a really great job at being a wedding guest. And you're the best cook here. You can respond, it's what you hired me for. It's what you hired me for. And then this one is, shall we? Shall we? And this is a polite and natural way to suggest starting something or doing something. For example, shall we? Tom said, offering his arm. So he invited Sophie to a dance just by saying, shall we? And then, shall we go inside? Is another example. Shall we go inside? Those are the key words and phrases from the story. What to do now is watch or listen to the story again and notice those words and phrases, and then share this story with a friend. Thank you so much for being here. Watch another English lesson with me, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.